what's really important that we need to understand is that men can't do this without women. Same way women can't beat misogyny by themselves, like without men. Women need men to do that. And we can't, fix these issues that like young boys have without women. We need each other. We are a social species and we need each other. So let me tell you all something. You all may find it incredibly interesting. So we've been talking about men. We've been talking about women. Recently, it's been an incredibly hot topic, especially since a friend of the stream, Andrew Tate, has been arrested for 2 months, and it seemed like he's going to remain arrested. Now, we didn't talk about it, but his appeal to get out of jail was denied again, obviously, because Romania, they just don't. Apparently, Romania, the Eastern European country, takes human trafficking more seriously than England, which honestly not necessarily surprised now that I think about it. It is England, but like with this being said. There was a video released recently from Big Think that talks about struggles that men have in male inequality in the really weird world that we're looking at right now, where men are like falling behind pretty drastically. And I wanted to take a look at this. We can talk about it a little bit. It's incredibly interesting.
A number of people warned me against writing a book about boys and men.
They told me
because it's such
that
a
I'm
broad
crazy
subject, particularly in politics right now, and because so many people were afraid that merely drawing attention to the problems of boys and men was implying somehow less effort being paid to girls and women, that it's framed as a zero sum, and it's sort of a whose side are you on question, and you have to be on one side or the other.
This is kind of true. How this happens, a lot of people, when you bring up like a topic about one group of people, they instantly go, but what about, even though you're not talking about them a lot. I have to do this a lot when we talk about men's issues, how I have to specifically say, do not say what about women while we're talking about this. I spend time talking about women like every single day and the problems that women go through literally every single day. And honestly, I've gotten to the point that whenever we talk about men, I have to bring up that you will be either banned or like temp banned or like timed out if you do what about women. If you what about women me while we're talking about like men's issues. We already talk about women all day, every day, as we should. But it's not, we should spend some time on other groups of people as well sometimes. It's kind of what leftism is about, everybody.
Rather than just being on the side of human flourishing. One of the real challenges.
Oh yeah, didn't Thought Slime do this recently? Thought Slime was like, we need to not have like men on our side. They're like basically lost. Leftism about giving power to like certain groups of people, but not others. I'm like, what the hell are you talking about? What are you talking about? But yeah, they did this recently. It was crazy. It's crazy stuff. So yeah, there are people who actually believe this. This is what I made some like comment the other day on the Bird app. I said, a lot of people, the problem with leftism is that there's a lot of people who like actually only have their you only know things about their political ideology through like through like right-wing memes about leftism. And some people didn't understand what I meant. And so let me explain here a little bit, okay? What I mean by that is, he made it sound like a zero-sum game. Yes, he did make, they made it sound like a zero-sum game, which is exactly what they're saying, is that it's a zero-sum game. When it's not. When it's the same. Here's the thing, okay? If you go down that route, then aren't the people who are like white genocide like telling the truth? Isn't that real then? You agree with the people who are saying white genocide is real and happening. You may not think it's bad, but you agree with them that it's real and happening. It's not real and it's not happening. More brown people having more clout in society, having more power, more money in society, doesn't mean that white people now have less. There are more women in college at this moment in time, but there aren't less men in college. There are both more men and more women in college. There's just more women than men in college at this moment in time, which, is fine, but no positions were taken from men. We didn't take power from men to give it other places because it's not a zero-sum game. We just give power to other people. So they're on like a similar level. It's much different. It's not like you have to take something from somebody to give something to somebody else. There are more white people in this country than there ever has been in the history of America. There are more white people in the world than there ever has been in the history of the planet. But there are also more brown people. It's just the only thing that's changed is the ratio, not the necessary power that individuals have. It's much different. But these people, they just kind of believe that. And what I mean by this is kind of, hey, remember like anti-work? Remember that whole anti-work debacle and that like mod from anti-work that went on to Fox News and got like clapped, got the shit pushed all the way up from their rectum into their stomach and out through their mouth again? They got like bodied so bad, but only by themselves because they were speaking. Because when they heard anti-work, the only thing that they thought of is that work is bad and cringe and we should never do work and or labor. When anti-work does not mean anti-labor. Anti-work just means, it just means like salaried work or like by hour work. It's just the same thing that you're saying. Like anti-capitalism is just like another way of saying that. How you're against like work for like a company and like a conglomerate and a corporation for money and a profit motive, but that doesn't mean that labor is bad and we're anti-labor. Anti-labor and anti-work are two incredibly different things. Labor needs to be done, but we wouldn't have work because work is in a leftist context. It's something different from labor in and of itself, but they didn't know that. They had no clue. They actually genuinely believed a right-wing meme, which is that left-wing people are just anti-labor, which makes no sense. We're not. Leftism is built off of labor. It's completely different than being anti-work. Anyways, or the people who genuinely just think that like the left hates men. Or just we all hate, or we should be hating men or something, or we should be hating white people or something. We're not. That's not what leftism is about. It's about giving power to everybody. It's about egalitarianism. We don't have to take things from people. We don't have to take anything from people for other people to be put up in the workforce. You don't have to like screw over people for other people to be able to shine. You don't have to take glitter away from other people for others to shine. You don't have to do that. It's not, you don't need to, right? Sometimes we would like to do redistribution, specifically when it comes to wealth in society, because you can't just make money printer go brr, brr, and just like print off quadrillion-dollar bills to give to like homeless people in Alabama. That it just wouldn't work. So redistribution would be the better course there, and to make society more equal. So sure, but we already do taxes, and everybody's already taxed. We'll talk about taxes a little later in the stream. But yeah, this is what I kind of mean, where like a lot of people just, their ideology about like leftism just comes from basically right-wing memes. The right wing says something about the left and they're like, yes, but it's actually good, which 99% of the time when the right says something about the left, it's not true. And it's true sometimes that they do say something about the left, and it's true and base, but it's far more rare that their imagination of what the left is far different than the actual reality. Anyways, I'm rambling and it's only 30 seconds into the video.
Challenges here is that if there are men missing from certain crucial areas of our society and our economy, that makes it harder for other men and boys to flourish in those areas. We have an education system that has a dearth of male teachers. We have a labor market where the jobs that are growing fastest are ones where we have the fewest men. And in families, there's the growth in what you might call the dad deficit or fatherlessness. As men are...
No, not the fatherless behavior. Not the fatherless behavior. Anything but this. Yeah, so this is something that women also experience and are still experiencing to this very day. STEM is one big area where it's really hard for women to break through in because women are treated pretty terribly. And the less women there are, the harder it is for them to break in and the more mistreated they are because there's less women to kind of balance out, shitty dudes who are there as well, right? They're good dudes. I'm a good boy and I was in STEM. But I remember specifically in my computer class, very real. Like my IT class and in my engineering class, my electrical engineering class and my IT class, both of those classes I think had literally one woman. We had one woman in there, period. That was it. Just one. Literally in both the 2 whole classes for 2 whole semesters, one woman, so 2 women each. It was kind of wild, right? And I still even remember like back in the day I had friends who were like, why in the world do we have like what's it called? What's that like woman coding thing to get girls into like coding? Girls who code? Yeah, I still had guys who were like, why in the world do they have girls who code? I can't believe they have girls who code. Do we really need girls who code? What, they need a whole thing specifically for girls? Yeah, they do.
As men are struggling in each of those areas, what you'll see is it'll be harder for other men to follow in their footsteps. It's harder for boys to flourish if their fathers aren't engaged. It's harder for men to enter occupations where there aren't men. It's harder for boys to do well at school where there are no male teachers to be seen. And so there's a very real danger that unless we act quite soon, that we will set in train something of a vicious cycle. I'm Richard Reeves. I'm a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution, and my latest book is Of Boys and Men: Why the Modern Male is Struggling, Why That Matters, and What to Do About it.
Men be smoking. That's true.
The overall picture is that on almost every measure, at almost every age, and in almost every advanced economy in the world, the girls are leaving the boys way behind, and the women leaving the men.
So this part is true. I think at this moment in time, girls and women in their like late teens and early to mid 20s are outpacing guys substantially in every regard, as far as I know. And this isn't like just in America, it's like everywhere around the world, and like severely outpacing to the point where it's like a massive issue. Now we talked about this before. There's like a couple of things that we talked about this with. One specifically is sometimes it gets brought up. There have been like articles in like the New York Times and Washington, WAPO, and a lot of other places that's like the gap in like professional women can't find any guys who meet or are like above their standards, basically. So they'll like go to college and they'll like become lawyers or doctors or some shit, and then like all the guys are like literally just vibing. They're just sitting there and they're like, what the hell? They're like, there's no guys at my level. And also what comes into it, like the guys who do go into those levels, they're not looking for professional women. Professional men, it's interesting. Professional women are looking for professional men, but professional men are not looking for professional women a lot of the time, or like high professional, like at their level. A lot of doctors like to date nurses, and a lot of male doctors like to date nurses, and a lot of like female doctors like to date male doctors or something like that, you know, as just as an example.
What nobody expected.
Oh, the Brookings Institute? Yeah, listen. These guys aren't perfect at all. If there's anything disagreeable in here, we'll disagree with it as it goes.
Just catch up to boys and men in education, but would blow right past them and keep going. Everyone was very focused, quite rightly, on getting to gender equality, getting to gender parity. It's not that long ago where there was a huge gender gap the other way, and there was huge focus, correctly, in the 70s and 80s to really promote women and girls in education. But the line just kept going, and nobody predicted that. Nobody was saying, what if gender inequality re-emerges in just as big a way as now, in some cases bigger, but the other way around? And to some extent, everyone's still trying to get their head around this new world where, at least in education, when you talk about gender inequality, you're pretty much always talking about the ways in which girls and women are ahead of boys and men. And that's happened in a very, very short period of human history. So if you look at the US, for example...
I do also want to know, like, I would imagine that the gap in like teachers, specifically in education, drops substantially when we talk about college professors as compared to like K through 12, right? Like K through 12 teachers, a lot of those, I would say like 60-70% are women. Like higher education, you know, college and university and other profession, like boot camp and what's the word I'm looking for? Like special training courses. I believe a lot of those are men. In my uni, we had like 5 female teachers at most in my 5 years in university. Yeah, that happens a lot. I wouldn't necessarily also like men not dating like women who are like on their level, I guess. I'm not sure if it's necessarily, we like to say that it's like fragility or something, or ego or something. It's just kind of like what's expected. You know what I mean? It's just gender roles that plays a lot into that. A lot of women just don't like. Here's the thing, actually, there have been studies on this, is that women actually are more averse to dating guys who are like below them socially than men are dating women who are above them. Same with like height. Like men are more open, at least on paper, when asked to date girls who are taller than them than women who are open to dating men who are shorter than them, right? And yes, once again, you can bring up all the issues you want. The fact of the matter is that it's true. You can bring up all the qualifications or like the asterisks that you want on that statement, which are real. It doesn't change the fact that it is true and happening and real. It's another product of patriarchy. Yes, it is once again another product of patriarchy, 100%. Yeah. We literally talked about how Shark was too scared to match with a girl he perceived to be more educated. It wasn't just more educated. She had just like way more going on than me. She had just way more going. I was in my summer before I started college that I barely got into. And she was like she was going for her psychology PhD. Yeah, I'm not. What are you talking about? I still believe that I'm completely right in this situation, where to like unmatch with that girl. Like I matched with a girl who was like, she was She was like, she had it all going on. You know, she bought her own car, she was getting her own house, she was going for a psychology PhD, she was going to be a therapist, and she matched with me, and I'm like, and I'm just like and I'm literally just some dude, and I'm like, I'm not gonna talk to this girl, I'm not gonna waste my time. And she probably didn't even mean to match with me. Like, I saw that match and I just unmatched her. I'm like, let her go on her way. I'd be literally wasting her time. Woman doesn't want anything to do with me. Let's be honest here. Let's be realistic. Some people are like, oh, you should, some people are gonna be like, shoot for the moon. If you miss, you may land among the stars. But you forgot that I only have a limited amount of arrows. So so instead of like trying to shoot at the moon and having a possibility to land among the stars, I think I'll shoot at a very large tree that I'm standing 5 feet from. I have a limited set of arrows. I'm not that much of a man. Yeah, I'm being real. I'm simply being realistic. Like, I'm not good enough to be her boyfriend yet. Literally. I think you're in the right. Thank you, 50 Cent. Thank you, 50 cents. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I'm perfectly fine. See, the problem is that idiom only works on people who are unhappy when they miss. I'm perfectly happy when I miss. Well, I see shots passing me by every single day, and I don't think twice about them. I'm happy that because you know what? Because missing hurts, and I'd rather, cause like actually missing hurts. You get like 100% of the shots you don't take, you miss. 99% of the shots you do take, you also miss. So I'd rather, if I'm missing near the same amount, but I'm happier, that seems like a W for me. Am I right, chat? You know I'm right. You don't want to say that I'm right, but you know I'm right. I guess. So true. And I don't listen, and I'm streaming, and now I'm a streamer. Do you know how less I would be able to stream if I was busy missing every single shot I took by attempting to date more? I honestly wouldn't be here right now. I'd be on my 57th failed date of the year.
Example, in the average school district in the US, girls are almost a grade level ahead of boys in English and have caught up in math. If we look at those with the highest GPA scores, the top 10%, 2/3 of those are girls. If we look at those at the bottom, 2/3 of those are boys. When it comes,
I thought that was pretty wild. Like 2/3 at the top of the class are women, are girls, 2/3 at the bottom of the class are guys. It like also, this gets into the idea, and we haven't talked about it much on stream, that like schooling's kind of like misandrous, and it doesn't work for how a lot of guys like to learn, and we don't take into consideration how like a lot of boys learn and their temperament that doesn't work well with the classroom a lot of the time. And we've been able to see this, how like a lot of boys get into a lot more trouble than girls do. Does that mean girls are simply just better human beings than boys? I don't think so. I just think I mean, like, you probably have some learning disability. Does that mean that kids who have no learning disabilities are simply better kids than you? I don't think so. I had to get tutored personally, and it was very hard. It was very difficult for me to just be in the classroom a lot. Also, pay attention. I hope I gave you a little flashback there. Fuck you. I saw you looking out the window. I saw you looking at another tab, dumbass. Pay attention. Does that mean that you're a bad person? Or you're like worse or something? No, I think schools just a lot of the time just aren't built for like how a lot of boys learn, which can be a lot more visual and hands-on. A lot of girls are just better, and we kind of teach them from like a younger age that, like, you know, sitting still, being quiet, and being able to like pay attention, or like just mend well. Just the way in which like patriarchy has said that how we should teach girls it just is way more compatible with like the wake up at 6:30 a.m. and sit in class from like 7:30 to 3 every single day, completely quiet, completely still, and learn and actually be able to soak up and retain all that information. It's just not something that a lot of boys are just good at. And so after that, then Big Pharma steps in, and then they start filling our boys with ADHD meds when they're just normal boys. Listen, we can get on the whole like pharma train sometime, something else, but it is possible that like a lot of boys don't have ADHD in the way that we think, but in the way in which we understand like a mental issue, right? You know how we determine if somebody has a mental issue? If it's affecting their life. And if we make something that's so crucial to their life as like being able to sit still, be quiet, not look out the window and pay attention all the time, then yeah, that can happen where a lot of boys just end up kind of having ADHD when they just don't mend well to the society that we've put together for them, which isn't always, the best thing. Modern education is kind of shit. And it also goes into the, some roughhousing as well. Like no schools for being scared of being sued by parents or whatever allows any boys to do any roughhousing. I tell you what, me and my boys, when we were boy maxing, all we did is roughhousing. I don't know what I like to this very day as I'm growing into a real man. I still only really roughhouse with my boys. I'm going to be honest. It's what we do. It's in my blood. But like at school, you couldn't do any roughhousing. Are you crazy? You'd all be put in detention or something, or you all have to like sit in class during recess instead. And it stops a lot of guys from being able to blow a lot of that energy stop a lot of boys from being able to blow a lot of that energy that they have. I did roughhousing with girls and guys. Girls do roughhousing too. They just do it less. I'm not saying any of these things are just like men exclusive. Just boys do it more. That's why 2/3 of girls are at the top and 2/3 of boys at the bottom. I wanted to throw rocks at someone. Maybe not throw rocks at somebody, but you ever be let out into the recess yard and you find rocks in the recess yard, and then you take a rock and then you and the boys just like see how hard you can throw them into a tree to see if they're gonna break. That's what I did. Me and my friends, that's what we did when we were in school. We'd find the really big tree, and then we'd all gather a bunch of stones, and we'd just start stoning the tree to see how hard we could throw the rock at the tree, and whoever could break a rock would be the king of the rock throwing contest over recess. And then after we're done, we'd go to see like what was inside the rock when we broke it. It is science. You're right. We were doing science, and you know what happened? And you know what happened when we did that? The teacher who was watching over us while we were at recess, she blew her whistle and she said, "Stop that. Stop it." And we were never allowed to throw rocks at the tree ever again. And you know what? I still think about that to this very day, and it makes me sad. Anyways.
Comes to going to college, there's a 10% gap in college enrollment, a similar size gap in completing college, conditional on enrolling. And the result of those trends is that the gender gap in getting a college degree.
Oh, this is actually, here, pay attention. Pay attention. This part's actually really interesting.
Conditional on enrolling. And the result of those trends is that the gender gap in getting a college degree is now wider than it was in 1972, but the other way around. So in 1972, when Title IX was passed to promote more gender equality in education, there was a 13 percentage point gap in favor of men getting college degrees. Now there's a 15 percentage point gap in favor of women getting college degrees.
That's pretty wild. That's pretty insane. And the thing is, it's only growing. That massive gap in men and women getting college degrees. And yes, more men are getting college degrees these days, typically, but they're falling behind a lot compared to women. And it could be possible that some people would say that like men have just kind of reached the apex of how many want to go to college, but I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. Like the dropout rate is a big thing. Poverty is a big thing when it comes to men going to college as well, and the trouble that they have being able to hold down jobs is an issue as well. I know my sister is way better at. I know it happened with me. Happened with my family. I have one brother and one sister, and guess who's in school right now? My little sister, and she's going to be a judge or whatever, or a lawyer, and I'm a YouTuber. I still make more money than her at the moment, and I'm in less debt. But will that always be the case? I'm not sure.
So the gender inequality we see in college today is wider than it was 50 years ago. It's just the other way around. There's quite a fierce debate about the differences between male and female brains.
Where the resource officer shoots them. That is true. This is also true that like boys get treated way worse by like resource officers and teachers, right? Like the standard for like what men do wrong and what women do wrong in the school are just way different, and we just treat boys way harshly for things that they do wrong. Especially since we have a bunch of resource officers and even armed resource officers in schools these days. The way that like boys get like destroyed by resource officers, right? They're more likely to go to detention. They're more likely to have like to get like suspended. They're more likely to get like thrown in jail. Like kids get thrown in jail these days because the cops are because they like disrespect the teacher or something, and then they get like
Is very real.
they get bodied by resource officers. This is a big thing with like a lot of minority kids. A lot of Hispanic and black kids get destroyed by resource officers. You've seen the videos of like a kid who like talked back to the teacher, and then the teacher calls the resource officer, and the resource officer just like wants to handcuff or like take the kid away or something. And you've seen resource officers like pick up kids and like slam them onto the ground and like arrest them like they're about to do a school shooting. Dude, the resource officers have a higher stoppage rate for kids who just weren't listening in class than they do school shooters these days. Okay, like that's a problem. That's a huge problem. And a lot of those kids who are getting like shitted on are boys, which leads to their learning being even worse. Like once that happens, the trajectory of their lives just completely changes. And it's really suck. It is huge suck.
This meme is very
I'm too
real.
non-American to make sense of what a resource officer is. Oh, so after the Columbine shooting, the government said, you know what would fix this socioeconomic issue of like school shootings and mental health? Cops. So then we decided that every single school, or as many schools as possible, would have an armed police officer who worked as the resource officer, whose main job is just to be the school cop, who's there every day from the opening of the school to the closing of the school. And that's just it. And they would walk around the school. They'd like work in the office. They'd just be the school cop who would do that. And so every single, like a lot of schools in the US, I think most schools in the US at this moment in time have at least one, if not two cops who are assigned as their resource officer, whose main job is just to be the school cop. Right. I mean, at my school, our resource officer, Officer Ramsey, he didn't really do anything, really. He just kind of walked around the school and then was like, "Hey guys, what's going on?" And then every now and again, he would stop one of the like dip kids from selling chewing tobacco to the like freshmen, and that kind of basically be it. Really, I don't think he necessarily did anything outside of that. But hey, listen, my school has a happy ending because when I was like about to be done with high school, Officer Ramsey quit being a cop, and then he went to his real dream, which is working at the early college and career center that we have in our area as a chef. And so he went from Officer Ramsey to Chef Ramsey, and he worked in our $1 million like early college and career kitchen that we had for our like cooking class that they did at the program. Yeah, he went from Officer Ramsey to Chef Ramsey. It was such a glow up. It was a huge glow up. I'm glad the U.S. has no more school shootings. So true. It worked a charm. But hey, let's be honest, okay? It did work a charm. They did exactly what they meant to do. That wasn't necessary. Putting more cops at school, and at the end of the day, wasn't to stop school shootings. It was to have cops at school. And if that was the criteria, it did work. Did bad things for society, but it did work. Happy endings are the best. Yeah, I did like Officer Ramsey. He was a cool guy. My bad. Chef Ramsey, no longer an officer. Chef Ramsey was super cool. I remember when I went to I took a class for cooking, and it was really cool. It was a $1 million kitchen. They had all the everything. Okay, there's like a $200,000 oven, and Chef Ramsey taught us how to make calzones. And it was so nice. We learned how to make homemade pizza and calzones. It was pretty sick. It was so good. It is the illusion of safety. You're actually in more danger. Yeah, when was the last time a resource officer stopped a school shooting? Does anybody know? When did that happen? Because I remember that time. The only thing I remember is when it comes to between like a school shooter and a resource officer is that a resource officer wasn't there. A resource officer didn't do anything when they were there. And a resource officer literally ran from the school shooter. That's the only time I remember like resource officers doing anything. Is those three scenarios. All three different school shootings. Either they weren't there, they were there and didn't do anything, or they actively didn't do it, or they actively chose not to do anything. Didn't that guy at Parkland drive into a ditch? I think so. You may have been thinking about Uvalde though. I don't think the guy at Parkland did he have a car? I know the Uvalde one, he drove into a ditch as well. That may be like their calling card. They like to drive into ditches. And like the resource officer that was supposed to be at Uvalde, he just kind of wasn't there. But then he showed up, saw the guy. Oh yeah, the resource officer at Uvalde, instead of him holding up the school shooter, he let the school shooter walk into the school, and then he pointed his gun at one of the teachers who was running away. I remember that. Cringe. Anyways.
And in adulthood, I think there's not much evidence that the brains are that different in ways that we should worry about or that are particularly consequential. But where there's no real debate is in the timing of brain development. It is quite clear that girls' brains develop more quickly than boys' brains do.
Any girl brains in chat?
The biggest difference seems to occur in adolescence. So what happens is in adolescence, we develop what neuroscientists call the prefrontal cortex. The prefrontal cortex of our brain is sometimes known as the CEO of the brain. It's the bit of your brain that says you should do your chemistry homework rather than going out to party. It's the bit of your brain that's...
One of our resource officers quit after hearing a gunshot after school. That's so cringe. Hey, listen, it's America's finest, right? America's finest.
It is worth maintaining a high GPA because it will help you get to college, which might help you in the future. And that bit of the brain develops considerably earlier in girls than in boys, between 1 and 2 years earlier, partly because girls go into puberty a bit earlier than boys, and that seems to trigger some of this development. What that means is that if you have an education system that rewards the ability to turn in homework, stay on task, worry about your GPA, prepare for college and so on, then just structurally, that's going to put an advantage the group whose brains have developed earlier in those particular areas. And that turns out on average to be girls. I think it's a great irony of women's progress that by taking the brakes off women's educational opportunities and aspirations, we've revealed the fact that the education system is slightly structured against boys and men because of these differences in the timing of brain development. But it took the women's movement to show that, because the natural advantages of women in education were impossible to see when women's aspirations were being capped by a sexist society. Now that those caps have been largely removed, we can see that it's boys and men who are at a disadvantage in the education.
So yeah, I want to make sure that we get this together. I think he explained that incredibly well. And this is actually a big reason for why feminism is great for guys, because we can now see problems that we weren't able to because only one side of the equation was there. Now that we have two sides of the equation, now that women are able to actually do what they want, at least to, a larger degree than what was possible before. Now we're able to see a lot of issues that are coming up so we can help other people again. That we can actually help boys who are growing up into this society to be able to succeed. We just have to have the will to be able to do it. But you know what's incredibly wild? In the future, it's possible that we could see a bill or something sometime, or we could see some like states sometime actually have like affirmative action, but for boys in education. Can you imagine that? That'd be wild. That'd be crazy with how like far they've like fallen behind. It could be possible that there could be, and there may be like a logically justifiable reason to have like affirmative action, but for boys in education to help them out. It's wild.
Education system.
Also, that's why Turks on feminists.
Let's collect the data first so we know what we're dealing with here. I do think that we should be strongly encouraging boys to start school a year later than girls. I think that should become the default in many school districts.
Really? Oh my goodness. What do you guys think about this? I don't know. I've never thought about this before. The idea that girls should go to school first before boys. Because I always thought we could just keep it as it is, move the timing later into the day, like starting school at like 10 instead of 8. That'd be cool. And then just be able to, and then have more options, have more teachers, have more options, have more classrooms, have more learning opportunities. So people can just learn in the way that suits them the best and not necessarily start boys later. But let's see. The
developmental gap that there is between boys and girls, because boys' brains mature more slowly, then them starting school a year later would mean that they were developmentally closer to being peers with the girls in the classroom. We need a lot more male teachers. It's striking that the teaching profession has become steadily more female over time. Only 24% of K-12 teachers now are male.
Whoa! Okay, I knew that the gap was pretty big. I didn't know the gap was like a quarter, less than a quarter of like K through 12 teachers are male. I had no, that's wild. That's pretty remarkable.
That's down from 33% in the 80s. And fewer men are applying to teacher training year on year. And so we've seen this steady shift towards a close to an all-female environment. That has all kinds of consequences for the ethos of the school, for the way we deal with different kinds of behavior.
And let's be honest, guys will have like growing boys these days will have a lot less like good role models in their life because they
meme is
don't
very
have
real.
like good guys in teaching roles. You know what I mean? Which is 100% true for all of these like boys who are growing up and like through school. Like a teacher and like a cool teacher, like a cool guy teacher could be a great male role model for like what you could be growing up, but without any of that whatsoever, it's kind of hard to be able to say that, and to be able to give them that. They're going to have to reach to somebody, right? And with like levels of fatherlessness growing and having even less, and the fact that not all fathers are necessarily great people, having more guys and more abilities to have more good options for like good role models would be great. But I mean, a lot of this is also on the idea that like guys are just not meant, the patriarchal idea that guys are just not meant to be around children. Remember that Daily Wire thing where like all the Daily Wire and like Crowder and all those guys and all the Republicans came out to say that like taking care of your children is gay and cringe, and like how they said verbatim, there's nothing for a father to do in the first like 5 years of their child's life, like literally nothing that you can give them as a father that they can. It's just insane. It's stupid. It's crazy. And these are the guys, mind you, these are the guys who said proudly that they couldn't take care of themselves if they like these are the guys who proudly said they couldn't take care of themselves if their wife wasn't there, right? Like I think like Matt Walsh said specifically he doesn't know how to do laundry. Literally has no clue how to do laundry. Michael Knowles doesn't know how to do dishes. Ben Shapiro knows how to do them, but he doesn't do them very often, so he's bad at them. And I'm like, you guys are literally children. Well, no, while saying that your children don't need you, you are children as well. It's wild to me. The people that care about men, yeah, these are the guys who supposedly care about men so much that they're taking up the mantle when the left have been so cringe. It's crazy. It's actually insane. Wild. Yeah, they can't function independently of their wives. Like their wives are more adults than them. Which I don't know how they're supposed to be the head of the household when the wife is actually the adult in the house, but whatever, I guess. Sure.
Among boys and girls, for example. And so we need a very serious and intentional effort to get more men into teaching. The third thing I would do in this world where I have...
Oh yeah, like a lot of people, like still on the men shouldn't be around children thing. A lot of people just think that guys who would like to work with children are just inherently creepy. And so why would you even like risk your entire like career that you work your life for being like upended by somebody just like being really shitty to you or like kicking you out because, you know, just by definition, if you're a guy who expresses interest in wanting to work with children, you're instantly on people's radar for being like a creep or like a rapist or something, which really sucks and is really stupid because it doesn't even work. It doesn't even go well with reality, because I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, when it comes to you know, adverse childhood things, and when it comes to, you know, like sexual abuse when it comes to kids, women are like they're pretty high up there when it comes to that. And on top of the fact, like, dude, all these freaking conservatives, the second a story comes out like a female teacher sexually assaults like young like 5th grade student, all the conservatives come crawling out of the woodwork. Damn, where was she when I was young? Man, I wish I was raped. Like it makes me I need to detox after that. Like detoxing isn't real, but I feel like I need to I take a long cold shower every time I see it, right? Even like Crowder does it. Tucker Carlson was famous for doing it. I think there's something incredibly noble about raising the new generation, especially since it's something that we don't care about in society. Apparently, like a lot of conservatives say that like, men and women, their whole like meme, they're like, I'm not a misogynist. Men and women are like the same. We're just we're equal, just different. It's separate but equal. That's men and women. I'm not a misogynist. I think women's work that they with child rearing and homemaking is so incredibly important. We're separate but equal. We need to do that. Even though they'll never be on for like paying women for the work that they do in the home or like home house child rearing or like any of these types of things that we could possibly do. We just completely don't care about any of this work whatsoever and don't think it needs to be paid, even though it's some of the most important work in society. And K through 12 teaching is some of the most important work in society, but we just don't care. Okay, sure. If it's separate but equal, you should pay them equally, huh? But that's when they go, okay.
Have significant power to dictate policies would be significantly more investment in vocational education and training. That is an area where we do seem to see better results for boys and men on average, and one that's woefully underinvested in the US. The US is...
That's what I was looking for, the word vocational. Yeah, vocational work and some like higher training outside of college is like pretty good. A lot of guys are going through that. I have a lot of friends who didn't go to college, but they did mechanics work, and they went to mechanics vocational things. Like once again, our early college program has a mechanic garage attached, and they did welding and mechanics, those two things that were there at the school that you could do for free. And people could, like, for free, if you had a problem with your car, you could for free take your car to the mechanics shop at the early college program, and they'll fix it for free. And it's a part of the kids like teaching. It's free because they may fuck up your car, but it's free. And I thought it was pretty cool.
Has really bet most of its dollars on a very academic, a very narrow route towards success, and less emphasis on vocational training. And that has actually put boys and men at a disadvantage. So apprenticeships, technical high schools are actually a really good way to help more boys and men. I think one of the challenges with this debate is that if you're talking to women and men who are, say, at the top of the economic ladder, 4-year college degrees, decent incomes, they look around and they don't see some of these issues. But that's not the same for working class men. That's not the same for men lower down the economic ladder. So there's a danger that we're so busy, to borrow Sheryl Sandberg's phrase, so busy leaning in that we don't look down. The reality for men further down the ladder is very different. The economic trends for men have turned downwards along 4 dimensions. One is wages. Most men today earn less than most men did in 1979. In employment, with a drop in labor force participation of 8 percentage points, which means 9 million men now of prime age are not working. We've seen a drop in occupational stature, and so there are now more men working in employment areas which are seen as lower status than they were in the past. And we've also seen a drop in the acquisition of skills, the kinds of skills and education that boys and men need. If boys don't get educated and men don't get skilled, they will struggle in the labor market. And across all of those domains, we've seen a downwards turn for men in the last 4 or 5 decades. And so the way in which social class divides have opened up, economic inequality has widened, is really important to understand in the context of gender inequality. If we only focus on gender gaps, then we miss the fact that both men and women at the top have done increasingly well, but that's much less true of everybody else, and especially it's less true of those from lower income backgrounds, working class boys and men, and black boys and men. You see many of those trends are amplified, and so those boys and men are really at the sharpest end of many of the social and economic changes. On the one hand, we have...
Yeah, this is really true. He's basically just saying the rich just keep getting richer and the poor people are just kind of wallowing and now getting poorer. The gap is widening and people's lives are getting worse. And I think it is important because no matter what you think, like 50% of the population is always going to be men, and how they do in society is going to be really important. Now, like later in life, men typically will do better, but there's a growing gap of guys who are just like doing really poorly, and it hurts society like a lot, and it always will trickle down to hurt women as well, because no matter what, like if there's an issue that hurts men, women will feel it. It always happens and it always will happen. Women will feel it. Almost every problem that guys have, women will feel it downstream in some regard. And so even if you're from like a cringe left, like the cringe leftist idea that we shouldn't care about men, it will hurt women, so you should care about it still pretty important. They're not incapable of connecting the final dots given their donors. Yeah, they won't do it very often, but every now and again they'll make it happen.
Have a huge and successful and laudable effort to get more women into STEM jobs, so science, technology, engineering, and math. On the other side, we have what I call HEAL jobs. So that's health, education, administration, and literacy, almost, if you like, the opposite side of the coin to STEM jobs. And that's where a lot of the jobs are coming from. Health and education alone are huge and growing sectors in the US. And so by my estimates, for every 1 job we're going to create in STEM between now and 2030, we're going to create 3 in HEAL jobs. But those jobs are at least as gender segregated as STEM jobs, but in the other direction. And unlike STEM, becoming more so over time. So if you look at the heal sector, only 24% of the workers in those sectors are male.
Goodness.
And that number is falling. And in particular sectors, we're seeing a really precipitous drop in the number of men. We have a drop in the number of male teachers. We have a very sharp drop in the number of male psychologists. That's dropped from 39% male to 29% male in the last decade alone. And among psychologists under the age of 30, only 5% are male. So we roll that forward, and we're going to see psychology becoming essentially almost an all-female profession.
This is also I'm not sure if he's gonna mention it, but this is also really important because like a lot of people are like, yo guys, go to therapy. I've gone to therapy before, and I've like had a therapist on retainer before. Bro, it's hard to find like a male therapist, okay? It's not like I'm against having like a female therapist or something, but she just won't really know what I'm going through. Like, let's be honest with ourselves. She just won't really know what I'm going through. She just doesn't know what it's like to be a guy. She hasn't lived that life. She may be able to read about it. She may be able to know about it. But like to have that personal experience to really understand what's happening, she doesn't have it. I like they could, and it's harder to shop around for like therapists who do actually have that. This is the big problem with a lot of like guys going to therapy. You could get like a female therapist and then she won't understand what it's like to be like a lonely guy, right? Especially if she's been like college educated and she knows a lot about like feminism and everything, which is good. But a lot of like, you know, scholastic feminism leaves out a lot of like issues that men have. And so it's hard for her to understand necessarily. There's a lot of bias because of that. And so a lot of guys can go to therapy, but then realize that therapy can't necessarily help them because it's really hard to find the male therapist who knows what you're going through. And then you'll stop going to therapy and then you just become worse and wallow in it and try to almost never go back because you already had such a horrible experience. This happens a lot. And it's really bad because that means less men are going to therapy, which is bad. Do you care if your therapist is black? No, because if I'm going to be honest with you, I don't really necessarily have any issues in my life that I don't already have a grasp over that stems from me being black. I'm going to be honest with you. There's nothing I really need to go to therapy for that stems from me being black, so I don't really care about having a black therapist. It's not really important. I do have issues in my life stemming from being a man. I don't have any issues in my life stemming from being black, as far as I know that I feel like I need to go to therapy for. So haven't had it's not really important to me. I need a strong man to hug me, to be honest. That's different. What you're looking for is not a therapist, that's an escort. But do your thing, partner. Don't let me stop you. I don't think men need to, I don't know what you mean by like softer. I'm not sure if we necessarily need to learn how to be softer, but there is 100% issue of guys talking to like boys growing up and talking to like their male teachers about issues that they have when it comes to being male and talking to therapists because there's just too little like other male, doctors to go around, and like 55% under 30, to even like be in my age range to talk to me about issues that my age range goes through. Like, let me tell you, okay, I've gone to psychology and I've gone to psychiatric help and things along those before. I think like 2 out of all of the psychiatric and psychology professionals I went to were men. One was like 65. Okay. One was like 65. All right. And the other one I think was like 35, and that was my therapist. My psychiatrist was like 65. The other one was like 35, right? And I talked to him about some important issues. But
real.
Yeah, it's really hard to find like male teachers and male teachers and male therapists to help you through your male problems that you have for being male. That women just you don't understand. You don't understand. That man is Jordan B. Peterson. Hey, he's about to have his psychology license taken away, so he may not be able to be your psychologist anytime soon.
So these jobs, which are both crucial, I think, for society and where it'd be very useful to have more diversity, are actually becoming more gender segregated. And so we have absolutely no effort to get more men into heal jobs, which is where I think the future lies and where we should be helping men to move. One of the
very true. If you're going through a struggle and you're looking for a doctor you're looking for like a therapist who comes from your background, if you're not a white woman, you're going to be looking real hard. You're gonna be looking for a long time, and it, you know, and it sucks. It really sucks.
Problems that we face is what I call in the book a dad deficit.
No, not the fatherlessness.
And that can be seen in various different ways. So 1 in 4 fathers don't live with their children.
Damn.
If parents split up, they're much more likely to lose contact with their fathers and with their mothers. And so 1 in 3 children, if their parents split up, don't see their father at all after a few years post the separation. So this
1 in 3
fatherlessness is something that's very, very specific. And when 4 in 10 children are born outside marriage, and most children to less educated parents are born outside marriage, then we have to reinvent what it means to be a father. Because right now, men are still being held to an old standard of what it meant to be a successful father in a world where that is neither possible for many of them or even desirable. Because what we've seen is as women have grown in economic power and economic independence, then of course they're going to choose to be with a man rather than being forced to, as in the old days. This is probably the greatest liberation in human history, honestly, that women can now choose whether to be with a man or not. More than 2 out of 5 households in the US now, a woman is the main breadwinner. 40% of American women earn more than the average man. These are huge economic changes and all for the good, but it does pose some really sharp questions about what fathers are for. And until we escape the obsolete model of the breadwinner father, then we will continue to see more and more men being left out of family life. And the kicker is that boys in families that don't have a father presence suffer much more than girls. And so then what happens is that male disadvantage can become intergenerational, because if the fathers are struggling and therefore not really involved in their kids' lives, then the boys are the ones who suffer most, who will then go on to struggle themselves in education and the later.
So yeah, so this is true, and it's really interesting how now we're seeing like a generational deficit in boys. Like that's what we're seeing now. It's quite interesting from like Gen X to millennial, and then maybe even like Gen Z. We're going to see like Gen Z boys, fatherless boys, and their fathers are fatherless boys. So we're now in a situation where we're like, a lot of guys are like 2 generations fatherless boys, and it's really bad because this is true, and we've talked about it before, that it is generational. It is a generational trauma with boys. It is very interesting how deep this really goes, because we talked about it before. There's a study that I find like incredibly interesting that we've talked about, and it basically goes over the fact how like when it comes to adverse childhood experiences, boys suffer way worse than girls do, and in all regards. No matter what happened to them, on average, boys will suffer worse than women do when they move on to society. They're not able to move on as much, and they're held back more by those issues that stem in their life. It's really interesting because of the way like masculinity is like woven into that, patriarchy is woven into that, and the way in which we look at boys and in society is woven into that as well, because trauma is weakness in like a patriarchy and like masculine society. It is weakness. It is viewed as like a weakness. Being like emotionally unstable is more of a weakness, and that can stem from like adverse childhood experiences. ACEs is what they're typically called in the research. And so if you grow up in a bad neighborhood, if you grow up poor, if you grow up being abused, if you grow up having issues when you step out of like gender roles, right? There's a big reason why a lot of boys have like and why a lot of guys have like a huge issue stepping out of gender roles and everything, because if you get bullied for that when you're little, you can take that with you for the rest of your life. And it's really bad because like boys are equipped with a lot less ability and a lot less tools to deal with those situations. We talked about it. Like this wraps into what we just talked about, how there's less therapists who are men. So a lot less guys who can talk to other guys who know what's exactly going on, who are trained professionals and not just some guy on the internet. And so now that there's like no male therapists out there to talk about your male problems, you know who they turn to? YouTube. And I gotta tell you, a lot of the guys who talk about male issues are not qualified to talk about them at all, and who need to be staying away from those guys as far as possible and manipulate them into their own personal and political gain. And that's what we're seeing these days. What we're seeing, I think the big rise in a lot of the like manosphere type of people wraps back into how people accurately describe as like the common allure of like misogyny and patriarchy. But to get there and to make it more appealing to these guys, it's far less appealing to a guy who's like doing well and is like doing good in society and comes from like a well-structured like family life and all of these types of things, to be roped to not be roped into a lot of these like manosphere places. Not to say that they won't, but it's a lot easier for them not to than for guys who feel like they have nothing, right? Remember when racism was coming about, like the racism that we have today from like the transatlantic slave trade and everything, when like slavery was abolished, how a lot of the rich and powerful people in society looked at the poor white population and said, hey, you have nothing and we took everything from you, but at least you're not black. It's very similar, right? How they can just, it can easily be used, the situation that they're in can easily be used to appeal to something greater, to give them something. It's easy for somebody to cling on something that's bad when they already have nothing, right? Because sometimes holding on to something that hurts you is better than not holding on to anything at all. You feel like you're like at the whims of society, feeling like you're at least have some control over what's going on, makes you feel better, even though it may be hurting you and like draining your life force at that point in time. It still feels better than doing nothing. They turned to people like Kevin Samuels, and now Kevin Samuels tried to turn to God, and after he got kicked out of the pearly gates. Hate to see it. Kick back down those damn stairs. See you later, bud. Very soon you go to hell. My brother always got made fun of by my dad whenever he would grow his hair out and paint his nails. And now he's in college and he's not very well adjusted, and he's never going to speak to my dad again. It's understandable. And like he's not well adjusted and he can have a lot of problems in life. This happens a lot. Do I have this on me here? Wait 1 second. Before I have this on me, I think it's called like masculine discrepancy. It's become such an issue that they've like coined a term for this, like masculine discrepancy disorder or syndrome. Oh no. Masculine discrepancy stress study. Because I can't find this shit apparently. I found the study instantly and I didn't save it to my bookmarks. I'm insane. Anyways, here, take a look at this. It's very important. Pay attention. So this wacky little chart here is very important. Okay, they've been able to finally map out what is wrong with men. They did the study because they asked the question, are men okay? And they realized they're not, and they made this perfect study to figure out how men are not okay. Some of you have seen this before, some of you haven't, but it's very important. Okay, very important. There's a lot of acronyms. Link to the study, eat my ass. Anyways, I'll give it to you in a second. It is a trauma math equation. Yes, the scientists have put together a trauma math equation. They have figured out what is wrong with men. Okay, so GRD is gender role discrepancy. It's like when you don't conform to the normal gender roles that you would imagine. And gender role discrepancy in boys specifically manifests as masculine discrepancy stress, the stress that you feel and the stress that you have in your life from being abused in society, or having notions that that you are not appealing to what men should be, right? So this can be that you're not strong enough, you're not tall enough, you're not big enough, people don't respect you enough, right? You're like poor, or you have to rely on other people and you feel not independent. You see this a lot in I talk about this book, I read it in high school, Raisin in the Sun. If you remember the father in Raisin in the Sun and how he had to work as basically like a chauffeur for like bigger, stronger, richer white men when he was black, and he wasn't allowed to, feel masculine in that society. He was always emasculated, called boy, all this type of shit, right? Always emasculated. And he couldn't even like take care of his own family, and the stress that he had in society because he couldn't take care of his own family by himself. He had to like live off his mom still, and he had to ask for his wife to do more in his life. He couldn't take care of his family there, and the stress that he felt there was a major plot point in the story. And I thought it was incredibly interesting because a lot of guys go through that. My dad, we have like a whole picture frame of our family. A lot of our some extended family, well, not really extended family, but like my family, my siblings, my parents and their parents, right? But in the center, and I can't show you it, but in the center of the frame is a drawn picture of my dad's father, my dad's dad, right? My grandfather, on my dad's side. And there's like a drawn picture of him. He's not smiling. It's just like a side profile image of him, and he's wearing like a cowboy hat. He's got glasses. He's a handsome man. Anyways, but there is no physical picture of him anywhere. And it's incredibly poetic. It's incredibly interesting because my dad talked about it before, how his dad wasn't in his life like too much, right? And it wasn't because his dad just like left or bailed on the family or anything. He wasn't in the family that much and wasn't like sharing a lot of memories with the family that much because he couldn't. He had to take care of his family. He spent all his time working. And he remembers, and he, you know, regaled me the story of how there was a long time, years in his life, where he would almost never see his dad because he would work, come home when they were asleep, put money on the table to make sure that they had a roof over their head, that they could eat, and that they could go to school. And he left to another job, right? His mom, my grandma, would like prepare him, you know, would give him like his lunch, and then give him like something to keep over for dinner, give him his breakfast, and then he would be out the door again before, you know, any of the siblings, any of the kids could get up and honestly see him and like spend time with him a lot. Now I have a great father. He's an incredible guy. I just thought it was an incredibly sad story how that's like something that happened, and it happens a lot. A lot of guys just in like societies like this, they're not even able to spend time with the children. Some of the most important things that you could possibly do as a father, like that's how capitalism has ripped our families apart to the point where men can't even be father figures in their kids' lives because they're busy being a profit figure, a profit making figure in the companies they have to work for to make sure that their kids actually have a roof over their heads. So you can spend more time with family, but you'll be spending a lot of time with them homeless, or God forbid you become homeless and then you have to find like a family shelter to sit in, and you're not, and as a man, you're not allowed to be in a part of the family shelter, because of what they mean by family shelter is mother and kid shelter, and men and fathers aren't even allowed to stay there with them. They have to go to the all males section and kept away from their families. So the families are even ripped apart at their most dire situations. Anyways, it's a tangled web, but this is basically talking about the connections that these things have. Masculine discrepancy stress leads to maladjustment, and trauma leads to masculine discrepancy stress as well. Once again, we talked about how trauma is seen as weakness. And so when you have trauma, when you're not well adjusted, when you have issues in your life stemming from things that happen to you, neighborhood disorganization, adverse childhood experiences, that leads to trauma, leads to masculine discrepancy stress. You don't feel masculine. You feel like, and like I said it before, I'll say it again. I don't think I need to talk to a room full of queer people about how important your gender is to the way in which you feel adjusted in society. Okay. I feel like you guys know already what we're talking about, so I don't think I need to necessarily explain this to you all, but this leads to maladjustment. All right. And I know I got some maladjusted people in chat. It's okay. I love you. It leads to hopelessness, mood disorders, like substance abuse, negative and harmful sexual behavior, and even violence. All of these things lead to issues that boys have in society, and it's really bad, right? So this is how all these things are connected. Anyways, here's the study for you all, stinkos, since you wanted it. It's a very interesting study. I've read through it all completely, and I thought it was incredibly interesting. I think you all would like it. Anyways, boop.
Labor market. It's clear by now that marriage and social institutions and a sense of purpose matter to men. And so as we've seen these real challenges faced by men in education, work, and family, you're seeing some really difficult and troubling health consequences. And so the so-called deaths of despair from suicide, overdose, or alcohol, 3 times higher among men than among women. Suicide itself, 3 times higher among men and women, and rising very quickly, especially among middle-aged men and younger men. So we can see these as symptoms, I think, of a broader malaise, which is what's troubling boys and men.
Society's giving men gender dysphoria for $1. Gender dysphoria for $1.
For men in particular, this sense of purpose is very important. I think it's a human universal that we need to be needed. There's a wonderful piece of work by an academic called Fiona Shand who looked at the last words that men had used to describe themselves before committing suicide or attempting suicide. And the top of the list were worthless and useless. I think if we create a society in which so many men do feel like they're not needed, then it's no surprise that we see these deaths of despair. We see problems with opioids. Opioids are a much bigger problem for men than they are for women. And one of the great tragedies of opioid deaths is the death rates are higher in part because the users are on their own. And so in some ways, the opioid epidemic is a perfect illustration of a whole series of things we're talking about, which is a loss of role in the family, a loss of status in the labor market, turning to drugs, and being isolated and withdrawn. And so in that example...
Yeah, because remember, at the end of the day, really being masculine and like masculinity is set in being useful to someone or something, whether that be like back in the olden days, useful to like your lord or master, being useful to like your wife or children, being useful to society when you're doing something. But now with all these jobs that feel like you're completely you are completely interchangeable and you are completely throwaway, and the businesses don't care about you when, you know, you're not useful in your like family, or you feel not useful in your family. Especially remember those Daily Wire boys once again have said that there's literally nothing for like a father to do in like a child's life as they're growing up. If you feel like there's no use for you in this world, nothing, why are you here? And why stay here? Just to suffer? Like the masculine discrepancy, like stress that you feel on top of you being not useful, feeling not useful to anyone, why stay? Why not just go? You know, it's easier than just living the next 60 years of your life, or, you know, living the next like 40, 50, 60 years of your life doing nothing and being useful to no one. So I completely see it. And it really sucks because being tied to doing something means that if you're not doing anything, means that there's nothing for you to do anymore. Nothing for you to live for anymore, which isn't true. But you can't really argue with that when that's what society beat into your entire life.
Example, I think you can see a symptom of this broader male malaise that we just need to take it more seriously, and we have a cultural responsibility as a society, men and women together, to help men and boys to adjust to this new world. Because right now, many of them are really struggling.
This is true. And once again, what's really important that we need to understand is that men can't do this without women. Same way women can't beat misogyny by themselves, like without men. Women need men to do that. And we can't, you know, fix these issues that like young boys have without women. We need each other. We are a social species and we need each other. And so this isn't like a one against the other type thing. We should all be here to help fix these issues together because everyone benefits from them. We all benefit from men doing better. We all benefit from women doing better. We all benefit from boys being able to express themselves. We all benefit from women being able to reach the heights that they want to. It's important. So yeah, I feel like I've been talking about this for too long, longer than I expected for a 15-minute video, but I like this topic. It touches me in my soul. My soul. All right, video's over. Fuck you. Get out of here. Oh, sorry. I didn't see you there. If you're enjoying the content, hit the subscribe button. If you don't, it'll make Boo very sad. I know a bunch of you who are watching are not subscribed. Join the frenzy. You won't regret it. Thank you, Boo.